The wind howled through the cold mountains. Snow fell slowly, covering the ground like a thick white blanket. The old man sat near the fire, alone, listening to the crackling sound of burning wood. He had lived alone in this cabin for many years. No one came to visit, and he liked it that way. People were noisy, loud, and full of trouble. He preferred silence and peace. But that night, something was different. He heard a sound very soft, almost like scratching. At first, he thought it was just the wind, but then he heard it again, closer, weaker, like someone begging. He stood up slowly, grabbed his old rifle just in case, and opened the cabin door. Outside was nothing but snow and darkness, but then he saw it, a small shape, barely alive, lying near the steps. The figure was curled up, shaking, skin blue and gray, not like any human. She had long fingers, big black eyes, and strange marks. On her arms, in her hand, she held a piece of metal, like it was the only thing she had left. She looked up at him with eyes full of pain and fear. Then she passed out. The old man didn't speak. He just stared at her, confused. She wasn't human, but she looked like a child, thin, broken, starving. He sighed and picked her up. She was light, too light, like she hadn't eaten in days. He carried her inside and closed the door. He placed her near the fire and covered her with an old blanket. She didn't move, but her chest rose and fell slowly. He made warm soup and placed it near her. Then he sat back down, still holding the rifle. "What are you?" he whispered, more to himself than to her, but she didn't answer. Hours passed, and the fire burned low. Suddenly she moved. Her eyes opened just a little, and she saw the soup. She reached for it with shaking hands. The old man didn't stop her. She grabbed the bowl and drank like she had never tasted food before. Spilling half of it, she kept going until it was empty. Then she looked at him, her lips parting like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. She just nodded, as if saying thank you without speaking. The old man watched her, not knowing what to do. She was clearly not human, but she was just a child, no older than 7, maybe 8 in human years. She wasn't a threat, at least not now. He stood and said slowly, "You can stay here for now." She didn't respond, but her eyes softened a little. She curled up by the fire again, still clutching that strange metal shard in her hand. Later that night, the old man examined the shard. It had lines and shapes that glowed faintly in the dark. It wasn't human tech, not even close. It pulsed like a heartbeat, soft, steady, alive. He placed it on the table and sat back, deep in thought. "What mess have I stepped into?" he muttered. He looked at the girl, now fast asleep by the fire. She looked peaceful now. But something deep inside him knew this was no ordinary child, and whatever she had run from, it might not be far behind. Outside, the wind screamed louder. But inside the cabin, for the first time in many years, the old man didn't feel alone. He didn't know her name, or where she came from. But something about her felt important, like she was meant to be here, like destiny had knocked on his door, and he had opened it without knowing what would come next. He glanced at the glowing shard again. It was now pulsing a bit faster, as if it sensed something or someone. The old man put another log on the fire and picked up his rifle again, just in case, because in the cold wasteland beyond his cabin, something else might be searching too, something that didn't want the little girl to be found. The little girl sat on the floor with her legs crossed, staring at the fire like it was the first warm thing she had ever seen. Her hands were still wrapped tightly around the metal shard, her thin fingers shaking now and then. The old man placed a piece of bread on a plate and slid it toward her without saying a word. She blinked at it, sniffed once, and then picked it up carefully. The way she ate was not normal. It was quiet, fast, desperate, like a wild animal afraid the food would vanish. Crumbs fell from her mouth, and she didn't stop to wipe them. The old man watched without interrupting, his mind turning with silent questions he had no answers to. She finished everything on the plate, licked her fingers, and then looked up at him. Her eyes were big and black, glowing slightly in the firelight. He raised an eyebrow and said, "Do you understand me?" She tilted her head, copying the motion like a mirror. Then she touched her chest with one hand and pointed at him with the other. The old man frowned, confused, but then she did something unexpected. She touched her lips and shook her head slowly. "No talking?" he said. She nodded, then pointed to her throat and made a soft rasping sound. The man leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin, a mute alien child found alone in the freezing wild, holding strange tech. If anyone from the old colony stations found out, they'd take her away, maybe dissect her. He didn't trust them, not after what they'd done during the last war. But this girl wasn't a weapon. She was scared and small. She needed food, rest, and maybe someone who wouldn't throw her back into the cold. Suddenly, the lights in the cabin flickered. The fire dimmed for a second, and the room fell into half-darkness. Then everything returned to normal. The girl looked frightened and backed away, her shard now glowing bright blue. The man stood up quickly, looking at the ceiling, at the wires, at his tools. But there was nothing wrong, no short circuit, no wind strong enough to shake the power. He turned his eyes to the girl, who was now curled against the wall, shaking. "It's okay," he said slowly. "You're safe here." The girl didn't answer, but the glow from the shard faded as her breathing slowed. She sat down again, watching the man closely like a stray animal learning to trust. He picked up a small notepad from the table and a pencil. He drew a simple stick figure of himself and wrote "me" above it. Then he showed it to her. She stared at it for a while, then smiled a little. He took another page and pointed at her, drawing a smaller figure with big eyes. She looked at the drawing, then tapped her chest. Her lips moved, but still, no sound came out. He saw her trying to say something. He leaned closer and whispered, "Your name?" She opened her mouth and pushed her voice as hard as she could. Only one broken sound came out, a soft "nen." Then she stopped, coughing lightly and shaking her head again. "NN?" he repeated. "Is that part of your name?" She shrugged, then nodded weakly. He sighed. "All right, I'll call you Nia for now." The girl blinked, then smiled, just a little. It was the first time her face looked calm. That night, he gave her a small pillow and an old blanket to sleep on near the fire. She curled into it quickly, holding the shard close to her chest. He lay in his own bed across the room, but he couldn't sleep. Too many questions, too many strange signs. What had she run from? What was that shard really? And why did it feel like something was watching the cabin from the dark woods outside? He stood up and walked to the window, pushing aside the curtain just a bit. The snow was falling heavier now, but the forest beyond looked still too still. No animals, no sounds, not even wind. His eyes scanned the trees, and for a second, he thought he saw a red light blink between the shadows. Then it was gone. He returned to the fire and looked at the girl. She was fast asleep, breathing softly. The metal shard now pulsed once every few seconds, like a heartbeat. He turned down the lamps and whispered to the darkness, "If you're out there, you better stay away," because the old man might have been tired. He might have been old, but he had once survived a war where monsters came from the stars, and if they were coming again, they'd have to get through him first. The sound came early in the morning, long before the sun touched the snow-covered ground. It was soft at first, like a distant hum in the air. The old man was outside chopping wood when he heard it. He paused, axe raised halfway, and tilted his head to listen. The sound grew louder, clearer, like something slicing through the wind. His heart skipped, because that sound wasn't natural, it was a machine. And in these mountains, machines didn't come by accident. He dropped the axe and looked up at the cloudy sky. A small black dot appeared far above the trees, moving too smooth, too steady. It had no wings, no lights, but it hovered like it was watching. The old man cursed under his breath and ran back inside the cabin. The girl was still sleeping, curled near the fire. He grabbed a thick cloth and covered her completely, hiding her from view. Then he shut off the lights and powered down the cabin's generator. Silence filled the room. He moved to the window slowly and peeked through a crack in the wooden frame. The drone was now hovering directly above the clearing. Silent but deadly. It had no visible weapons, but the old man had seen enough during the wars to know what it could do. He counted the seconds in his head, hoping it would leave. But the drone dipped lower, scanning the cabin with a thin red beam. The beam touched the snow, the door, the windows, and then paused near the roof, the metal shard hidden under. The girl's blanket began to glow again. It pulsed brighter than ever before, as if it recognized something above. The girl stirred and let out a soft breath. The old man turned and placed a finger to his lips, motioning her to stay still. She didn't move, but her eyes opened wide. She was shaking, more from fear than cold, and that's when he knew she had seen drones like this before. The drone made a sharp clicking sound, and the red beam turned blue. Something in the air shifted, like static crawling over the skin. The old man moved quickly to his workshop table, opened a drawer, and pulled out an old jammer. He hadn't used it in years, but maybe it still worked. He slammed the switch, and the jammer lit up with a dull green glow. Above the cabin, the drone shook once, lost balance, and then zipped away at high speed. Within seconds, it vanished into the clouds. But the man knew it wasn't over. If the drone saw her energy signature, others would come. He turned to the girl, now sitting upright with the blanket around her shoulders. Her eyes were wet, and she looked at him like she was sorry, like she had brought danger to the only safe place she had left. He knelt beside her and said gently, "You don't have to speak, just nod if you understand." She nodded slowly. "Did that thing come for you?" Another nod. "Have they found you before?" A pause, then a nod again, slower, heavier. He sat back inside, staring at the fire that was now just embers. The girl wiped her eyes and pointed toward the sky. Then she held up her shard and tapped it softly. It glowed again, but this time, shapes appeared in the air above it. Holograms, fuzzy, broken images of stars, ships, and strange symbols. She moved her fingers through the light, drawing a path through the stars. Then she pointed to one glowing dot far away and touched her chest. The message was clear. That's where she came from. The old man watched in silence, feeling the weight of something much bigger than himself. This wasn't just a lost child. She was running from something powerful, something that could send machines across the stars just to find her. He stood up and locked the doors, pulling down old metal shields he hadn't touched in years. He turned on the backup generator and walked to the radio, then stopped, calling. For help meant attention, and attention meant risk. No, he would handle this alone. That night, the sky remained quiet, but the girl stayed awake. She didn't close her eyes once, just held the shard and stared into the dark. At one point, she whispered a sound so soft it almost wasn't real, one syllable, broken and full of pain. The old man didn't ask what it meant. He just sat beside her, holding an old rifle and watching the windows, because something told him that whatever she was running from, it was already on its way. And next time, it might not just be a drone. It might be something worse. Something that didn't come to search. Something that came to take her back. The old man fell hard on the frozen ground. His breath left his chest as his shoulder hit a rock hidden under the snow. Pain shot through his arm, sharp and sudden. He cursed under his breath, trying to move, but his right hand wouldn't work. He had gone outside to check the power lines and slipped on a patch of ice. Now he lay there in the cold snow falling gently over him. From the cabin, a soft sound reached his ears, bare feet running on wood. Then the door opened fast, and the little girl rushed out. She didn't speak, but her eyes were wide with fear. She looked at him, then at his twisted arm, then dropped to her knees beside him. He tried to wave her back, but she didn't listen. Her hands touched his shoulder gently, and her shard slipped from her fingers onto the snow beside them. What happened next didn't feel real. Her hands began to glow faintly, not like fire or electricity, but like warm light. The snow around them melted slightly. The pain in his arm began to fade. He stared at her, confused, trying to understand. She wasn't using tools. She wasn't using medicine, just her hands and that strange light. His bones shifted gently under her fingers. The swelling calmed. Within seconds, he could move his fingers again. She pulled her hands back and looked at him like she was waiting for anger. But he didn't yell. He didn't back away. He just looked at her like he was seeing her for the first time. "You healed me," he whispered, and she nodded. Then she picked up her shard again and held it to her chest. The glow faded and her breathing slowed. They sat there in silence, snow falling around them. He looked at his arm, flexing it carefully, still not sure if it was magic or something else. She stood up and helped him back to his feet. They walked slowly toward the cabin, and this time, he leaned on her instead of the other way around inside. The fire was still burning low. He sat down, pulled off his coat, and stared at her. "Where did you learn to do that?" he asked, knowing she couldn't answer. She didn't even try this time. Instead, she walked over to the small desk and picked up his pencil. She began to draw not a face, not a house, but a strange circular shape with lines through it. When she was done, she pointed to it, then pointed at herself. He leaned over the paper, eyes narrowing. "I've seen this before," he said slowly. "Back during the war. On enemy tech." Her head dropped, and she hugged her knees like she was ashamed. He sighed and softened his voice. "You're not the enemy, not anymore." She looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. Then she walked to the window and stared outside like she was waiting for something. That night, after she fell asleep, the old man stayed awake. He pulled out a dusty metal box from under his bed. Inside were files, photos, maps, memories from the days when he served in the Terran border guard. He flipped through them until he found a faded page with that same symbol. The file was old, marked Alien Class, Royal Tech Hybrid. He read the notes slowly, each word chilling him deeper. "A living conductor," the page said. "Able to activate ancient machines with touch. Unknown origin, likely last of her kind." He looked over at the girl sleeping by the fire. So small, so quiet, yet carrying something ancient in her blood. Suddenly, the radio on his desk crackled to life. Even though it was turned off, static hissed through the cabin. Then a voice came, broken and slow. "We have found her." The voice wasn't human. He jumped up and pulled the plug, but the voice continued. "She will return to US." Then silence. The girl didn't wake, but the shard at her side glowed with a deep red pulse. He stepped closer and picked it up carefully. It was warm now, and for a moment, he saw moving lights inside it like a galaxy trapped in stone. He set it down again and looked at the girl. "You're not just running, are you?" he whispered. "You're being hunted." In the distance, far beyond the hills, a faint blue light rose into the night sky. It flickered once, then sent out a sharp pulse that shook the glass in the cabin windows. Something ancient had just been awakened, and it was looking for her. The ground shook before the sound reached them. It was deep, low, like thunder trapped beneath the earth. The old man sat up from his chair, eyes wide. The girl was already awake, standing near the window, frozen in place. Her shard pulsed in her hand, red now, not blue. She looked up at him with fear in her eyes, the kind that said she already knew what was coming. Outside, trees bent with the force of wind. Even though there was no storm, then a light appeared in the sky, sharp and fast, cutting through the clouds like a blade. The man grabbed his rifle and moved to the window, heart pounding. It wasn't a drone this time. It was a ship, black and long, with wings that folded inward like claws. It hovered silently above the trees, casting a shadow so dark it swallowed the snow beneath it. Then, slowly, it lowered itself into the clearing near the edge of the forest. The girl backed away from the window and dropped the shard. It hit the floor with a heavy thud, and a strange tone rang out. Like a warning bell from another world, the old man moved fast, pulling a hidden panel in the floor, revealing a trapdoor. He looked at the girl and pointed down. "Go," he said. "Hide." But she didn't move. Her eyes were locked on the Ship outside, lips trembling, hands clenched. Then came the sound of metal hitting snow-heavy boots, marching in sync. Figures stepped out from the ship. Tall and armored in black, their helmets glowing red. They weren't human, and they weren't here to talk. The man ran to the door and locked every bolt. Then aimed his rifle at the front. He knew it was pointless, but he'd rather die fighting than let them take her without a fight. The girl stepped forward and stood beside him, her hand brushing against his coat. He looked down at her, shocked. "You should be hiding," he said, but she shook her head. Then slowly she opened her mouth, and for the first time, a sound came out clear and full of pain. "No," she whispered, "no more running." The words were heavy, full of power. The windows cracked slightly, and the fire blew sideways like something unseen had passed through the air. The old man looked at her like he had never seen her before. Her body glowed faintly, her eyes. No longer afraid, outside, the black-armored soldiers raised their weapons and stepped toward the cabin. Then the girl stepped forward and opened the door before he could stop her. Snow flew in, but she didn't feel cold. She walked barefoot into the night, each step calm, steady, full of purpose. The soldiers stopped, watching her, unsure. One of them stepped forward and removed his helmet. His skin was pale silver, his eyes dark. He looked at her with a strange mix of respect and control. "Your time is over," he said in a deep voice. "You belong to the void." She didn't answer. She raised her hand slowly, and the shard on the cabin floor flew into the air, spinning. Glowing bright blue once more. The sky above them rippled like water, and a wave of energy pushed outward in a silent blast. The snow lifted into the air, the trees bent back, and the armored soldiers staggered. Struggling to stand, one of them dropped to one knee, his armor cracking slightly at the chest. The man ran outside, calling to her. But the moment he touched her arm, he felt something like electricity run through his bones. The leader of the soldiers shouted something in a strange language. The girl turned her eyes on him, and for a moment, the wind stopped. The snow froze mid-air. Time itself seemed to hold its breath. Then, in a voice louder than before, she spoke one word: "No." Every soldier was thrown back into the snow as if hit by invisible force. The ship shuddered, lights flickering, engines choking. The girl fell to her knees, breathing hard, hands shaking again. The power had come, and now it was leaving her just as fast. The old man ran to her and caught her before she collapsed. She looked up at him, tears in her eyes. "I don't want to go," she whispered. "Please." He held her tight and nodded. "No one's taking you," he said. "Not while I'm still breathing." But deep down, he knew something bigger had just begun. And whatever had come for her, this was just the first wave. Somewhere far beyond the stars, something ancient was watching, and it had just heard her voice. The girl slept for 2 days without opening her eyes. Her body didn't move, her breathing stayed soft, but her skin still glowed faintly in the dark. The old man didn't leave her side, not even once. He placed water near her lips, cleaned the cuts on her arms, and kept the fire burning bright. Outside, the snow never stopped falling. But nothing came from the sky since the night of the attack. The black-armored soldiers were gone. Their bodies vanished without a trace. Only burn marks remained in the snow, like something had erased them from the world completely. He sat in silence, watching her sleep, wondering what kind of power lived inside such a small child. She had faced them alone, spoken one word, and everything changed. But the cost of that power had taken something from her, and he feared what might happen when she woke up again. On the third night, the fire cracked louder than usual. The girl gasped and sat up with wide eyes, sweating, shaking, her hands glowing bright. The old man rushed to her side, but she pushed him back with one hand, not in anger, but fear. She looked at him like she didn't recognize his face. Then her eyes filled with tears, and she whispered something soft. "Aria." He leaned closer, confused. She placed her hand on her chest and repeated it, stronger this time. "Aria." He nodded slowly. "That's your name," he said, and she gave the smallest smile. Her voice was weak, but she was speaking now, like something had unlocked inside her after the fight. She spoke few words, always short, always tired. But she remembered, piece by piece, and her story began to form. She pointed to the stars she had drawn, showed him the shard again, and whispered names he didn't know. Then she drew a symbol in the dirt, a crown with fire above it. She touched her chest again, and he understood. "You were royalty," he said, "a princess." She looked down like she was ashamed of it, but he placed a hand on her shoulder and said gently, "You're still just a girl to me." That night, they worked together. He showed her old tools, broken wires, lost tech from a forgotten age. She held each one like it was a living thing, and somehow they came to life in her hands. Lights turned on, metal bent gently, wires hummed with energy. He was amazed, speechless. She wasn't just connected to machines, she was born from them. In the early hours, she pointed to the shard, and then to the mountain beyond the trees. "There," she said, her voice shaking. "Mother... Father." He looked in the direction she pointed, his face tightening. "You think they're alive?" She closed her eyes and shook her head. "Not alive... Memory." They prepared a small pack, took tools, food, and wrapped her in warm clothes. They would travel at dawn. Before they left, he opened a wooden box and pulled out a silver key with a blue gem. "This opens the old vault beneath the ridge," he said. "No one's been there since the war." She looked at the key then, touched it. The gem glowed for the first time in years. They stepped out into the snow while the world was still asleep. As they climbed higher, the trees grew silent, the wind faded, and the stars above them seemed to blink slower. He carried the pack, and she walked beside him with quiet steps. No more fear, just determination in her small face. Hours passed before they reached the entrance, an old iron door buried under stone. He placed the key inside the frozen lock, turned it, and stepped back. The door slid open with a low rumble, and a gust of warm air rushed out. Inside was darkness, but not empty darkness. It felt alive, like the vault had been waiting for someone to return. She stepped inside without hesitation, the shard glowing brighter with each step. The old man followed, his heart beating faster with every echo of their feet. The hallway led them to a massive room filled with strange machines, still powered after all these years. In the center was a tall crystal tower, covered in alien symbols. Arya walked to it and placed her hand on the base. The tower lit up, slow at first, then rising like fire through glass. Images appeared in the air, her mother, her father, holding her when she was small. A kingdom in the stars, burning under enemy fire. The voice of her mother filled the chamber. "Arya, you are the last, and your light is the key to remembering us." Tears ran down her cheeks, and she looked at the old man. "I'm not just a child," she whispered. "I'm their memory." He stepped forward, placed a hand on her shoulder, and smiled. "Then let's make sure they're never forgotten." But far above the vault, deep in space, something else had awakened too. The signal was sent, and it was received by something ancient, something silent, and now it was coming. The snow didn't fall that morning. It simply stopped. The sky above the mountains turned a strange shade of silver, like the clouds had frozen in place. The old man stood outside the vault, staring upward. His breath caught in his chest. He didn't need words to understand something was coming. Arya stood beside the crystal tower deep in the vault, her eyes closed, hands glowing brighter than ever. The machines around her pulsed with energy that had been dead for centuries. She wasn't afraid anymore, not of the cold, not of the hunters, not of what she truly was. The old man walked back into the chamber and placed his hand on her shoulder. She opened her eyes slowly and smiled. "They heard." "It," she whispered. "Heard what?" "He asked my call," she said, the voice of the lost. Suddenly, the ground rumbled again. Sharper than before, lights flickered across the walls. Alarms started to hum, and the crystal tower grew warmer. Arya turned toward the exit. "They followed the signal," she said. "They're here, They rushed back outside. Where the silver sky had turned almost white, a giant ship broke through the clouds. Bigger than the one before, its shape was smooth like a blade, and it hovered without sound, casting a massive shadow over the valley. Figures began dropping from it, slow and steady this time. They weren't in black armor. They were wrapped in living metal, tall and silent, glowing from within. The old man lifted his rifle out of instinct, but Arya placed her hand on the barrel and shook her head. "No weapons," she said. "Only memory." The creatures landed, surrounding them. None spoke, none raised their hands. They simply stared at her like they recognized her from a dream long buried in time. Then one of them stepped forward and lowered his head. Arya stepped ahead and spoke in their old tongue. Words rolled from her lips like water over stone. The creatures bowed slowly, one by one, and dropped to one knee in the snow. The sky ship dimmed its lights. The old man looked at her in awe. She wasn't a lost child anymore. She was something more. A voice of peace, a living key to the past. But even as peace returned to the valley, far in the distance, a second signal pulsed across the stars. Arya felt it before the others. She turned to him and said, "Not all of them want peace." He nodded, already knowing. "But they'll have to go through me first." That night, after the ship left and the strangers returned to their stars, Arya sat by the fire again. The shard rested on the table now, silent and dim. She looked at it like one might look at an old photograph. A piece of who she was, but no longer who she needed to be. The old man stirred the fire and passed her a mug of warm tea. "You ever gonna leave?" he asked. She smiled and shook her head. "This is home now," she said, "and you're my family." Outside, the snow began to fall again, soft and calm, just like it used to. And in a cabin deep in the mountains, a little girl who once had no voice now spoke freely. A warrior who once had no one now had a daughter. And the stars, once cold and silent, now carried their story across every world that would listen, because sometimes the smallest voices are the ones the universe was waiting to hear.